The ranch had stood empty for years, until 4 Apache sisters came, begging him to claim them all. The wind howled across the barren land, carrying with it the whispers of a forgotten past. For years, the ranch had stood empty, its once vibrant fields now dry and cracked, the house a shadow of its former self. It was a place that had been abandoned, left to rot under the harsh sun and neglect. The barn had fallen into disrepair, the roof sagging under the weight of time, and the fences had long since crumbled away, leaving the land open to the elements. No one came here anymore, not since the old man had passed. He was the last of his family to live on the land, and when he died, the ranch was left to fade into obscurity. The man who had once worked the fields, tended the animals, and made the ranch thrive was now gone. His children had all moved away, leaving the place behind, as if it were just another forgotten piece of history. But for some reason, this place called to him. Jake Walker stood at the edge of the property, his boots crunching the dry earth beneath him as he gazed at the ruins of the old ranch. He had inherited it from a distant relative, someone he barely knew, and had come to check on the property, unsure of what he would find. Part of him wanted to sell it off, get rid of the place, and never look back. But another part of him felt drawn to it, as if the land itself had a story to tell, a story he was meant to uncover. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the broken barn and the empty fields. Jake's thoughts drifted back to his childhood, to the times when he had visited the ranch with his father. Back then, it had been a thriving farm, full of life and activity. His father had always spoken about the ranch with pride, telling Jake stories about the history of the land and the family who had lived there. But that was before everything had changed, before the man who had once been the heart of the ranch had died. Jake had grown up, moved away, and built his life elsewhere. But now, standing here on the property that had once meant so much to his family, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of nostalgia. There was something about this place that called to him, something that stirred his soul and made him feel as though he was meant to be here. With a deep breath, Jake began to walk toward the old house. The front door hung loosely on its hinges, creaking in the wind as he pushed it open. The inside was just as he had imagined, dusty, abandoned, and filled with the scent of old wood and forgotten memories. He ran his hand along the banister, feeling the rough texture beneath his fingers as he made his way through the empty rooms. Each one was a reflection of the past, a snapshot of a time long gone. The walls, once painted with bright colors, were now faded and cracked. The furniture, though sturdy, was covered in a thick layer of dust, as though it hadn't been touched in years. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that he was intruding on something sacred, something that deserved to be remembered. But as he walked through the house, his mind began to wander. Should he keep the ranch, sell it off to someone who could restore it, or simply leave it as it was, a relic of a time gone by? He had always dreamed of owning land, of having a place to call his own. But was this really the place he had imagined? Was this ranch worth the effort it would take to bring it back to life? The answer didn't come immediately. Instead, he found himself standing in front of the fireplace, staring at the empty hearth. It was a simple stone structure, weathered by years of use, but it had a kind of warmth to it, as though it had once been the center of life on the ranch. Jake imagined the crackling fire, the sounds of his family gathered around it, the laughter, the stories shared. But those days were long gone. He turned to leave, but as he stepped outside, he heard the sound of a car approaching in the distance. At first, it was just a faint noise, barely audible over the wind. But as the sound grew louder, Jake turned to see a dust-covered vehicle coming down the long, gravel driveway. He squinted into the setting sun, trying to make out who was in the car. As the vehicle drew closer, Jake could see that it was an old, beat-up pickup truck. The engine sputtered as it came to a stop in front of the ranch house, kicking up a cloud of dust that lingered in the air. The driver's side door creaked open, and out stepped 4 women. They were all dressed in simple clothing, their faces weathered from the sun, their eyes tired but determined. The women stepped toward him, their footsteps firm and purposeful. They were strangers to him, but there was something familiar about them, something that tugged at his memory. He didn't know who they were, but the look in their eyes told him that they had come for something important. One of the women, the oldest of the 4, stepped forward and spoke. Her voice was soft but steady, filled with a quiet strength that caught Jake off guard. "We've come to claim the ranch," she said. "It belongs to us." Jake blinked in surprise, unsure of what she meant. Claim the ranch? He asked. I don't understand. This place has been empty for years. Why now? The woman's eyes softened, but there was a sadness there too. This ranch has been in our family for generations, she explained. But it was lost, left behind when our ancestors passed away. We've been searching for a long time, and we believe this is where we belong. The other three women stood behind her, their expressions equally serious. They didn't look like the kind of people who would make a claim without good reason. They looked tired, worn down by years of hardship, but there was a fire in their eyes, a determination that was impossible to ignore. Jake felt a wave of confusion wash over him. He had never heard of these women before, and yet they spoke as though this ranch was rightfully theirs. He opened his mouth to ask more questions, but the words caught in his throat. There was something in their eyes that made him want to help, something that made him feel like maybe, just maybe, he was supposed to be here too. For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. The wind died down, and the silence that had once enveloped the ranch seemed to fade away. All that was left was Jake, standing before these four women, their desperate need hanging in the air between them. And for the first time in a long time, Jake felt a sense of purpose. Maybe this was why he had come to the ranch in the first place. Maybe it wasn't just about the land. Maybe it was about helping these women reclaim their heritage, their home. He nodded slowly, unsure of what the future held, but feeling more certain than ever that he had a role to play in this story. "We'll figure this out," he said softly, his voice filled with the weight of the moment. "I'll help you." And so the story of the ranch began anew, as did the story of the four Apache sisters and the man who had come to claim them all. The following morning, Jake stood at the edge of the ranch, feeling a strange sense of responsibility. The four women had spent the night in the old house, their presence a reminder that the ranch had a history far beyond his own connection to it. They had introduced themselves the night before, and now, in the light of day, Jake could see their differences more clearly, and the shared strength they all carried. The eldest of the sisters, named Rosalie, had been the first to speak. She was in her late 30s, her face weathered and strong, with long black hair that fell in loose waves around her shoulders. The second sister, Sella, was a few years younger, her eyes bright and determined, with a quick smile and an energy that could not be ignored. The third, Taya, was quieter, with an air of grace and patience that seemed to flow through everything she did. And finally, the youngest, Lena, had the softest features but the hardest edge, her fiery spirit clearly evident in her every move. They had all made their way to the ranch in the hope of reclaiming what was rightfully theirs, a piece of land that had been lost to time and circumstance. Jake knew little about their family, but their claim seemed genuine, and their bond was undeniable. They shared a deep love for the land, for the ranch that had once been the heart of their family's legacy. The sisters sat together at the kitchen table the next morning, the sounds of birds chirping outside the window blending with the clinking of cups and the soft murmur of their conversation. Jake stood by the window, watching them for a moment, unsure of what his next steps should be. The sun had just risen, casting golden light across the land, and he couldn't help but feel like there was something more at play here, something beyond just the ranch. "I know this isn't easy for you," Rosalie said, looking up at him. Her voice was calm, but there was a weight to her words that made Jake stop in his tracks. "You've inherited this place, but it belongs to us too. We've been searching for it for years. We didn't want to impose on you, but we had no choice. We need this land. It's our heritage." Jake nodded slowly, feeling a strange sense of responsibility wash over him. He had no connection to these women by blood, yet there was something about them that felt like family. They weren't strangers. They were part of the same story, a story he had never known until now. "I understand," Jake said, his voice steady but unsure. "But what exactly are you asking for? I don't know much about your family or why this ranch is so important to you." Rosalie looked at the other sisters, her eyes filled with unspoken understanding. "Our father was the last to live here," she explained. "He was a rancher and this place was his pride and joy, but when he passed, no one knew what happened to the property. It was left behind, forgotten, until we found out it was yours. We were raised with stories of this land, of our ancestors, but we've never been able to see it for ourselves until now. This ranch represents everything we've lost, everything we've fought for." The weight of her words hung in the air, and Jake could feel the sincerity behind them. He had never understood the power of heritage, of family ties to land until now. He thought about how his own family had left their roots behind long ago, how the ranch had become just another distant memory. But the sisters before him were fighting to restore something that meant far more than just a piece of land. They were fighting to bring their family's legacy back to life. "I don't know how I can help," Jake said, still unsure of his place in their story. "I barely know how to fix up the ranch myself. It's in terrible condition. The house, the barn, it's all falling apart." Taya smiled gently, her calm demeanor grounding Jake. "We're not asking for you to do it alone," she said softly. "We're willing to help. We've worked hard in the past, and we're more than capable of putting in the effort to rebuild. We've lived through hardships before. The land is what we need. With it, we can rebuild our family." Jake looked at each of them, seeing the resolve in their eyes. They were determined to make this place their home again, and they weren't asking for charity. They were offering their own hard work in return. "What are you asking me for then?" Jake asked, his voice quieter now. "What do you need from me?" "We need you to help us claim it," Rosalie said. "We need you to help us make it official. We've done all we can, but the legalities, the paperwork, it's complicated. We need someone who knows the system, someone who can help us navigate it, someone who can help us fight for what's ours." Jake felt a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't about taking over the ranch or forcing them off the land. It was about helping them reclaim what they had lost. They weren't asking for anything more than a fair chance. And as much as Jake had been uncertain about the ranch, he realized that helping these women would give it new purpose. It wouldn't just be a relic of the past. It could become a place of life again, a place of hope. "I'll help you," Jake said, his decision settling in his chest like a weight being lifted. "I don't know how long it will take, but I'll help you fight." Jake's decision to help the sisters felt like the right one, but it didn't make things easier. The paperwork was a maze of legal jargon and outdated records. He spent days sorting through the old files in the town's records office, trying to track down ownership documents and old deeds that might prove the ranch truly belonged to the sisters. With each passing day, the weight of responsibility seemed to grow heavier. The sisters, determined and strong, were there by his side, helping him every step of the way. But Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was trying to stop them from succeeding. Rosalie spent most of her time at the ranch, organizing the sisters' efforts to clean up the property. While Sella and Lena worked tirelessly to fix up the barn, Taya spent her days cleaning the house and making it livable again. They all had different strengths, but each one played a vital role in the restoration. Jake admired their determination. It was a different kind of strength than what he was used to. They didn't just throw their hands up when things got difficult. They got to work facing each challenge head-on. The ranch was no longer just a place of decay, it was becoming a home again. But despite their hard work, there were setbacks. For every day they spent cleaning and repairing, it felt like there was someone or something out there pushing against them. They would find the property gates mysteriously locked in the morning, or someone would damage the freshly painted barn. The threats were subtle but clear. Someone did not want the ranch to return to its former glory. One afternoon, as Jake stood in the field, gazing out at the land, Rosalie approached him. She seemed troubled, her usual calm replaced by a look of concern. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice low, "about why we've had so many issues here. It's more than just bad luck. Someone is deliberately trying to stop us. I don't know who, but I have a feeling it's tied to the ranch's past. There's something here, something hidden that people don't want us to find." Jake listened closely, feeling the weight of her words. "What do you mean, something hidden?" he asked. "Is there more to this land than just the ranch?" Rosalie hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "There's an old family secret, something our father kept hidden. We don't know exactly what it is, but we've always been told that the ranch holds something valuable. Our ancestors knew about it, but when our father passed, the truth was buried with him." Jake felt his curiosity grow. He had heard bits and pieces of the ranch's history from the sisters, but this was new information. He had assumed that they had come for the ranch itself, for the land, the house, the memories, but now it seemed there was something more to it. "Something deeper. You think someone is trying to stop us from finding it?" Jake asked. "I do," Rosalie replied, her eyes narrowing with determination. "I think someone has known about this secret for a long time and doesn't want us to uncover it. Maybe it's tied to the ranch's old legacy, or maybe it's something worth a lot of money. But we need to find out what it is before it's too late." The conversation weighed heavily on Jake's mind as the days passed. He tried to focus on the legal matters, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Rosalie's words. There was a mystery at the heart of this place, something that was more than just the ranch. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that they had all been brought together for a reason. This wasn't just about a piece of land. It was about something far more significant. The next day, Jake joined Rosalie and the sisters at the barn. They had managed to fix most of the damage done by vandals, and now they were beginning to repair the inside of the house. But as they worked, the tension in the air was palpable. The ranch felt different now. It wasn't just a place of history and memories, it was a place of secrets. "I think it's time we started searching," Jake said one evening as they sat around the kitchen table. "If there's something hidden here, something tied to the ranch's past, we need to find it. The sooner we do, the sooner we can put this all to rest." Rosalie looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. "We'll help you search," she said, "but you have to promise me that we'll take it slow. We don't know what we're dealing with, and I don't want anyone getting hurt. The ranch holds a lot of power. We need to be careful." "I promise," Jake said, his voice firm. The next few days were spent searching every inch of the ranch. The sisters, despite their exhaustion, were determined. They combed through the old house, checking the walls for hidden compartments, the floors for loose boards, and the attic for anything that might have been left behind. Jake spent his days poring over old maps and documents, trying to piece together the history of the land. It wasn't long before they found something. It was Lena who discovered the hidden compartment beneath the floorboards of the barn. The floor had been worn and cracked from years of neglect, and as she was inspecting one of the damaged boards, she noticed a faint outline beneath it. With a few careful movements, she managed to pry the board up, revealing a small wooden chest hidden underneath. Jake's heart raced as he knelt beside Lena, watching her pull the chest from its hiding place. It was old, with intricate carvings on the sides, and it looked like it hadn't been touched in years. The air around them seemed to grow heavier, as if the land itself was holding its breath. With a trembling hand, Lena opened the chest. Inside, there were papers, old photographs, and a small, weathered box. The papers were too fragile to read easily, but Jake carefully sifted through them, trying to make sense of the history they contained. The photographs depicted the ranch in its prime, with people Jake didn't recognize, and in the corner of one photo, he spotted a familiar face, the face of the man who had once owned the ranch, the one who had passed away. There was something unsettling about the box, though. It was small and delicate, and it appeared to have been kept hidden for a reason. "I think we've found it," Rosalie whispered, her voice filled with awe. "This is what our father left behind, the legacy he wanted us to find." But as Jake held the box in his hands, he couldn't shake the feeling that their discovery was only the beginning. Whatever was inside the box, whatever the papers and photographs revealed, was part of a story that had yet to unfold. And the deeper they dug, the more it seemed like someone was determined to keep that story buried. As the days passed, the discovery of the chest seemed to hang in the air, an unanswered question that Jake and the sisters couldn't shake. What was inside that box? What did it all mean? The box had been hidden for so long, and yet when they opened it, it seemed to bring more questions than answers. Whatever was locked away in that small, delicate container, it was clear that it was connected to the ranch's past, and to the danger that loomed over them now. Rosalie, Taya, Sella, and Lena gathered around the table in the house that evening, their faces filled with anticipation. Jake had carefully set the box on the table, still unopened, and they all stared at it as though it were a ticking clock, waiting to reveal its secrets. The weight of what they were about to do hung heavy in the room. Whatever was inside, they knew it would change everything. "I think we should open it," Jake said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. This moment felt like the turning point, the moment when everything they had worked for, all the struggles and obstacles, would either come together or fall apart. Rosalie nodded, her expression a mixture of curiosity and caution. "We have to be careful," she warned. "If this box is what we think it is, there are things here that may not be meant for us to find." Jake could feel the weight of her words, but his resolve was firm. This wasn't just about the ranch anymore. It was about uncovering the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. Slowly, Jake lifted the lid of the box. Inside, they found several old documents, their edges frayed with age. The papers were written in an elegant, flowing script, but most of them were too worn to read clearly. There were also a few photographs, yellowed with time, and a small, intricately carved stone that seemed to hum with a quiet energy. "What is all of this?" Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she reached for one of the photographs. It was an image of a man Jake didn't recognize, standing next to a woman with a stern but kind expression. Behind them, the ranch stretched out, the land looking alive and prosperous. But there was something about the image that unsettled Jake, a shadow, barely visible, hovering behind the man and woman. "I think these are our ancestors," Rosalie said softly, her voice reverent. "This is the history we've been searching for, but these documents, they don't look like anything we've seen before. This stone, it feels strange." Jake picked up the stone, examining it carefully. It was smooth, cold to the touch, and carved with intricate symbols. The symbols were unlike anything he had ever seen, almost otherworldly, and for a brief moment, Jake could feel the stone pulsing in his hand, as though it held something powerful inside. "We need to figure out what this means," Sella said, her voice determined. "This is what our father was hiding, I know it, and someone doesn't want us to find it." Jake's mind raced as he looked at the stone and the photographs. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but there were still too many gaps. Who was the man in the photo? What was the significance of the stone? And why was it hidden so carefully? That night, as they pored over the documents and tried to make sense of everything, a feeling of unease settled over them. The ranch, which had once seemed like a quiet, forgotten place, now felt alive with secrets, like the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for the truth to be uncovered. The next morning, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was a subtle sensation, like someone was standing just out of view, always in the background. He couldn't see anything, but the hairs on the back of his neck stood up every time he turned around. Something was wrong. The sisters noticed it too. They'd heard strange noises in the night, scraping sounds on the walls, footsteps in the distance, whispers carried by the wind. It wasn't just their imagination. It felt real, like something, or someone, was out there keeping a watchful eye on them. The peaceful mornings they had once enjoyed on the ranch now felt uneasy, as though the land had become hostile. "I don't like this," Taya said one afternoon as she worked in the garden. "I can feel it. There's something out there, something we're not seeing," Jake agreed. The peaceful atmosphere they had once tried to create seemed to have shifted, replaced by an unspoken tension. The work on the ranch had slowed, and every step they took seemed to be met with resistance. The barn, once full of promise, now felt like a trap. The house, which had been steadily restored, now seemed to groan under some invisible weight. That night, as they gathered around the fireplace, Jake felt a sudden wave of dread wash over him. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to shift, and the fire crackled with an eerie intensity. It was as if the house itself was alive, watching, waiting. "We need to find out who's behind this," Rosalie said, her voice quiet but resolute. "Someone is trying to keep us from uncovering the truth, but we won't let them stop us. We've come too far." Jake nodded, his mind made up. They couldn't turn back now. They had already come so far, and whatever the cost, they needed to uncover the truth. But the deeper they went, the more dangerous it became. The next day, as they searched through the remaining documents, Jake found something that made his blood run cold. It was a letter buried deep in the stack of papers. The letter was written in the same elegant script, but it was different. It was addressed to someone by name, someone Jake had never heard of before. The letter spoke of a deal, a promise made long ago, and it hinted at something dark buried beneath the ranch. The letter's last words struck Jake like a blow. "If they ever come looking for what's buried here, stop them at all costs." "What is this?" Jake asked, his voice shaky as he held up the letter. "Who is this addressed to, and what does it mean?" Rosalie's face turned pale as she read the letter. "It's a warning," she said softly. "Whoever's been watching us, they've known about this for a long time. This isn't just about the ranch, it's about something much bigger." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The stakes had just gotten higher. Someone had been waiting for them, watching their every move, and now it was clear that they were going to stop at nothing to keep the ranch's secrets buried. The truth was out there, and Jake knew that finding it would come at a cost. The ranch wasn't just a piece of land. It was a key to something much larger, something that had the power to change everything. And whatever it was clear that someone would go to great lengths to make sure they never found it. The morning after they found the letter, Jake and the sisters knew things had changed forever. The warnings, the secrecy, and the sense of being watched had grown too real to ignore. Whoever was behind the attempts to stop them from uncovering the ranch's history was not going to give up easily. They had to move quickly, but carefully. The truth they were seeking was no longer just a matter of family legacy. It was something much deeper and much more dangerous. They gathered in the kitchen that morning, a quiet tension in the air. The letter Rosalie had read aloud the previous night still lay on the table, its words etched in their minds. If they ever come looking for what's buried here, stop them at all costs. What exactly are we dealing with? Jake asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. He had no answers, only more questions. Who was behind this? What was buried here? And why had their father kept it all hidden? Rosalie stared at the letter, her mind racing. We don't know the whole story yet, she said, but someone doesn't want us to find out, this place. It's not just about family. There's something else here, something that's been kept hidden for a reason. Jake nodded, but his thoughts kept returning to the stone they had found with the box. The strange, carved object seemed to pulse with energy every time he touched it, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it was key to understanding everything. We need to figure out what this stone means, Jake said, looking at the small object on the table. I don't know how, but I feel like it's tied to all of this. Rosalie agreed, but there was still a part of her that wasn't sure. We've only scratched the surface. The stone, the papers, the photographs, it's all part of the bigger picture, but it's dangerous. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. That evening, after the day's work was done, they decided to do something they had been putting off, a thorough search of the ranch grounds. If there was something buried here, something hidden deep in the earth, they had to find it before whoever was watching them did. As night settled over the land, the air grew cooler, and the ranch seemed to take on a different character. The once quiet place now felt alive, full of unseen eyes, shadows that moved just outside the reach of the light. They walked the perimeter of the ranch, their flashlights sweeping through the darkness, but it felt like they were walking through a different world, one that didn't want them to find what they were looking for. Jake and the sisters stopped near the old well that had been there long before they arrived. It was an old, rusted structure, covered in vines, the stones cracked from years of neglect. Jake's flashlight caught something glinting in the dirt beside the well, a small metal object half buried in the soil. His heart skipped a beat. He dropped to his knees and gently pulled it out. It was a key, old and rusted, but it seemed important. I think we found something, Jake said, holding the key up to the others. Rosalie stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she examined the key. This might be it, she said. This could be the key to the hidden part of the ranch, the one that's been sealed off. The group exchanged glances, a mix of excitement and fear in their eyes. This was it, the clue they had been waiting for. They didn't waste any time. Together they moved toward the barn, their steps quick but careful. The barn had always felt different, like it held secrets behind its old walls. They had repaired the structure, but something about it still felt like it was hiding something. Jake approached one of the large wooden doors that had been boarded up for years. He tried the key in the lock, and to their surprise, it fit perfectly. With a creak, the door swung open, revealing a hidden room inside the barn. It was smaller than the rest of the space, and the air inside felt cold and stale. The room was filled with old, dusty crates and boxes, and the walls were covered in strange symbols, the same symbols that were etched on the stone. The more Jake looked, the more he felt like he was stepping into another world, one that was tied to the ranch's forgotten past. This is it, Sella said softly, stepping inside. This is what our father kept hidden. Whatever it is, it's in here. Jake stepped forward, his flashlight illuminating the crates. The room seemed to pulse with an energy that made his skin tingle. As he moved closer to one of the crates, he noticed something strange. The lid was slightly open. Without thinking, he reached for it and pulled it open. Inside, he found a large, leather-bound book. The cover was weathered, but the book felt solid and heavy in his hands. He opened the book carefully, and the pages inside were filled with more of the strange symbols they had seen before. There were drawings, maps, and notes, all written in a language that none of them recognized. It was clear that this book contained the answers to everything they had been searching for. I don't understand any of this, Jake said, flipping through the pages, but it's definitely important. Rosalie stepped closer, her eyes scanning the pages. This book, it's part of our family's legacy. Our father must have known about it, but he never shared it with us. The more they looked through the book, the more they realized that it wasn't just about the ranch. It was about something much larger, something that connected their family to the land in a way they had never imagined. This was the key to unlocking the secret that had been hidden for generations. As they continued to study the book, a sudden realization struck Jake. The stone, the symbols, the maps, they were all connected to something buried beneath the ranch. It wasn't just about the land or the ranch itself, it was about what lay hidden deep in the earth. "We need to dig," Jake said, his voice filled with urgency. "It's all here. Whatever's buried under the ranch, we need to find it now." The sisters looked at each other, their faces determined. They had come this far, and there was no turning back now. They gathered their tools and began to dig, starting in the area near the well where Jake had found the key. The earth was hard, but with each shovelful, they got closer to something hidden deep below the surface. Hours passed, and just when they were beginning to think they might be digging in vain, the shovel struck something solid. It was a large wooden chest, just like the one they had found before. Their hearts raced as they carefully dug around it, pulling it free from the earth. This was it, the moment they had all been waiting for. Together, they opened the chest. Inside, they found a treasure of unimaginable value, not gold or jewels, but something more precious. The chest was filled with artifacts from their ancestors, items that had been passed down through generations. There were symbols carved into the objects, and ancient tools, all tied to the family's heritage and the history of the land. As they stared at the contents of the chest, the ranch seemed to come alive around them. The land that had once seemed forgotten was now a living, breathing testament to their family's legacy. The secret had been revealed, and with it, the true purpose of the ranch. It was never about the house or the land alone. It was about the connection between their ancestors and the earth, a bond that could never be broken. Jake looked at the sisters, his heart full of gratitude and respect. They had fought for this, for their history, and for each other. And now they had uncovered the truth. The ranch had been waiting for them all along, and so, with the secrets of the past finally revealed, the ranch began a new chapter. The sisters were no longer searching for something lost. They had found it. And together, they would continue to honor the legacy of their ancestors, forever connected to the land that had given them everything.